We're going to go and analyze more of this historic moment of President Biden signing that $61 billion foreign aid package, $61 billion for Ukraine, much needed at this time. So we're going to analyze it now with our guest, joined by Adam Borowski, an international relations analyst. Welcome to the program. Good to have you.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So before we begin here, I want to just, because it's President Biden who's just signed this very, very recently, today, in fact. So let's ground this conversation. Let's play a short clip of what he said today in Washington. Roll that now for you and our viewers.
America's going to send Ukraine the supplies they need to keep them in the fight. This weekend, there were reports, and I find this amazing, the reports of cheers breaking out of the trenches in eastern Ukraine. Probably came from one of your folks, a reporter or someone. I'm not sure where it came from. But they're cheering as they watch the House vote in support for Ukraine. It's not like they don't understand what we've done. Not like they don't understand how critical this is for them. I'm making sure the shipments start right away. In the next few hours, literally the few hours, we're going to begin sending in equipment to Ukraine for air defense munitions, for artillery, for rocket systems, and armored vehicles. You know, this package is literally an investment, not only in Ukraine's security, but in Europe's security, in our own security. We're sending Ukraine equipment from our own stockpiles. Then we'll replenish those stockpiles with new products made by American companies here in America. Patriot missiles made in Arizona, Javelins made in Alabama, artillery shells made in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Texas. In other words, we're helping Ukraine while at the same time investing in our own industrial base, strengthening our own national security, and supporting jobs in nearly 40 states all across America. You know, the United States is not acting alone, to state the obvious. Our allies in Europe and around the world who've constantly been asking me, are we going to step up? We're not going to walk away, are we? How many, and some of you have been in these international meetings with me. They're very concerned. Had we failed to step up, Lord only knows what would happen to the cohesion in NATO. They're also sending significant help to Ukraine. We're all standing together against this brutal dictator. As I've argued for months, this is directly in the United States' national security interest. If Putin triumphs in Ukraine, the next move of Russian forces could very well be a direct attack on a NATO ally.
All right, so there we have some interesting points there from President Biden. I mean, I think we see an interesting analysis. We've got a show of timing, right? Now, suddenly we can send this immediately, but it'd take months for us to get here. Interesting point. Let's look at the political angle of this on the U.S. side. President Biden mentioned 40 U.S. states that will benefit from part of this, I think up to $23 billion to replenish U.S. stocks from Arizona to different states, Pennsylvania. So, I mean, this is an investment, as he's put it. So why on earth did it take so long if this benefits Democrats and Republicans and workers in the U.S.? Why did it take so long for this to finally get to this point?
Unfortunately, it could be down to Russian propaganda. We tend to forget how strong and how effective it can be. And of course, we had Tucker Carlson's interview with Putin, and that had an impact as well. So, you know, we talk about money, we talk about politics, but we forget about minds and influencing minds. Unfortunately, Russians tend to be good at that. If you know what Russian propaganda is about, it tends to be cartoonish, even funny. But unfortunately, a lot of people still see Russia as this romanticized Russia, and they are still present in the U.S. as well among the political class. And unfortunately, this could be one of the main reasons why this took so long, because, you know, this post-truth world that we live in, and it's so easy to basically brainwash people, propagandize, and we need to really counter that because, unfortunately, Russia has a lot of experience when it comes to, you know, propagandizing and brainwashing. And I think that's one of the main reasons why this took so long.
But I think it's obvious when you look at U.S. politics that this issue divided very much Democrats and Republicans. We have Trump, we have Joe Biden. I mean, they're already pulling their strings here. But what does it say? What does this situation say about U.S. politics right now?
Well, right now, of course, the U.S., America is good at coming together when they realize that there is national interest at stake. So even though, of course, you have groups there that believe in all sorts of nonsense, when it comes, when the real interest is at stake, they are going to come together. And of course, the U.S. political class overwhelmingly realizes that this, protecting Ukraine and aid for Ukraine is important for the U.S. It's crucial for U.S. interests, in spite of various counter arguments, so-called counter arguments. That's why they're able to come together, and that's crucial. Let's hope it stays that way, because unfortunately, Russia is going to exploit weaknesses in the U.S. political system. There are various individuals, I won't name them, we know who they are. They spout nonsense about Ukraine, and unfortunately tends to gather at times some kind of audience, including the political class. So fortunately for us, the majority in the U.S., they understand what's at stake, and they are pushing ahead with helping Ukraine. So it took some time, but luckily for us, hopefully it's not too late. Ukraine is going to get the aid it so desperately needs. We just saw, the attack on TV station in Kharkiv, and that's just one example of what Russia is capable of, and what Russia plans to do in other, areas, not just in Ukraine, if it gets that chance.
Well, unfortunately, in the United States, there are still people saying this is not our war.
Yeah.
Because it's so far across the pond in Europe, yet they don't really understand maybe what NATO is, right? And the cooperation between all the countries.
And I think also, I want to follow up on both your points here, because you said about, touched on disinformation, misinformation, but also let's look at the politics of it with this bill, because it's this foreign agents, aid bill for including Ukraine, including Taiwan, including Israel. So was that maybe because it was all bundled together that created, because you mentioned national interest, and perhaps there's more of a, let's say, case you made for Ukraine and maybe a different case made for Israel and Taiwan. Did that complicate this? Is that why we had to wait so long?
Well, of course, with Israel, there were some accusations, of double standard, that Israel was protected, whereas Ukraine was not, right, for a long time, and is still there's lacking in terms of, air defense, of course. So there are complex issues here. So of course, Taiwanese situation is different. Israeli situation, we have Israeli military, but you have Gaza crisis, of course. So there are many, many aspects to consider. So when you need to bundle this together, there are undoubtedly many contradictions that need to be resolved before this can be pushed forward. But
yeah, so
overall,
potentially, just to jump in, so potentially, you're saying in your analysis, potentially this could have been done faster had it been just simply the Ukraine aid bill, technically.
Potentially, yes. Given, that the situation that Taiwan, Israel, and Ukraine, of course, they are basically the same problem, right? We're fighting against autocratic regimes. Basically, there are different parts of the world, but it's the same issue. But of course, ideologically, on the ground, there are different topics. There are different issues to consider, such as, like I said, with double standards in Israel. And of course, Israel is a really charged topic because of Gaza, because of Iran, because of everything that's going on there. So obviously, this needed to be reconciled somehow. And fortunately, it happened, and the bill got passed.
But it seems that Ukraine is the most controversial one, I think. I think United States is closer mentally to Israel than Ukraine, so perhaps if it was voted separately, perhaps that would be actually bad news for Ukraine. I mean, who knows? We can just speculate right now. But would you say that political pressure from all around the world paid off this time?
I would say so, but I also believe that, the U.S. political class, they are not really, they don't tend to bow down to pressure. I believe that, it's really can't tell what was the deciding factor here. It's really tough to tell. We can theorize whether it was pressure from across the planet, but it probably, there are many factors involved. With things like this, you never know. Sometimes it's a personal factor, right? So seeing what's happening on the ground, just talking to people that went through this horror. Sometimes it takes just that. It's really, it's not always black and white. You can't really tell what was the deciding factor here.
Well, actually, Mike Johnson, let me interrupt you here. Mike Johnson said that because he's a Christian, he says this is a right thing to do. But another question is, do you think this will cost him a seat?
Well, that's a great question. Of course, there is I won't name who she is, but we know who she is. She spouts nonsense, and
Right.
she's very much threatening that Mike Johnson, that he has to be vacated because of what because he supported this bill. Yeah, it's possible, but unfortunately, if he really says that he did the right thing, so even if that happens, he can have that satisfaction, because when you listen to what what some people are saying, and I think that Professor Timothy Snyder, his excellent rebuttal, just to he just addresses this nonsense and just you know points out how nonsensical it is, breaks it down. Unfortunately, we are in this post-truth world where you basically can't get to some people, can't get through to them anymore, and that's the problem, because Russia knows this. Russian propagandists know it, and they tend to use it very, very well. So we can only hope that we are going to be able to keep our, critical minds intact, and we are not going to let the Russian propaganda poison the political class too much. Unfortunately, there will always be some people that will be affected by it, but we need to make sure that they stay in the minority, because otherwise, this is really going to be a problem for us all, not just for Ukraine, but the consequences will be grave across the planet.
Yeah, and I think also interesting point about Russia still, unfortunately, very powerful in its influence. We've seen that not just indirectly in the United States. We're seeing it very much play out now in Europe as well, with the findings from the Czech government in terms of the influence on the MEPs, influence in Germany, across other places as well. So I get what you're saying. I'm just curious about now. I mean, we're all applauding and looking, and many are cheering what the U.S. has finally decided to do here. But I mean, it is a lifeline, isn't it, Adam? It's not now, this is it, this is the final victory. What are your views on what this might impact in terms of also other allies now, also North America, maybe Canada, maybe other NATO partners, European partners? Will they now basically come on parity and say, okay, now we're also going to follow suit? What's next here with this?
Well, of course, this political wrangling in the U.S. it has been noticed around the planet, both by democracies and, of course, by regimes. And, the U.S., yes, it's great that we finally have this aid, but at the same time, it took some time, and that's a lot to think about, because that could indicate that the U.S. is no longer willing to help as much as it used to. And so, yeah, it's great that the Ukraine, this aid is there, but there are some voices whether it's not too late, and so we just don't know, because it's we're going to have to see. So this political wrangling, it's people's lives. This is not just some politicians talking about it. There are people dying. There are people being maimed for life. So this is really, really serious. So unfortunately, yeah, this is a huge issue, because it makes you think, okay, what kind of world is this? Is human life, for example, in Ukraine, worth less than in Israel? These are important questions, and unfortunately, we need to answer these questions, because we might say openly, diplomatically, yes, they are the same, they're worth the same. But when you look at the underlying details, like with Israel and protection of Israel and from Iranian attack, and then what happened in Ukraine, with the drones and no protection whatsoever for a long time. And then, of course, it makes you question what's going on. Is it really the same to some people, for example, in the U.S. political class? I think these questions need to be addressed, even within our own conscience, if not openly.
Yeah, and I think, Adam, also, as you said, this has cost lives, this wrangling.
Right.
We know that very much contributed to Avdiivka falling and the Russians pushing in. Let's hope that this impetus will now push the other way. Look, we'll close it there. Adam Borowski, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you very much. And I think also that it's also a campaign year in the United States.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we see these two worlds, people dying, and then you have political games, unfortunately.